All right, welcome guys to the Draft Savages podcast. I'm your host Seth Cox. With me, as always, one of my co-hosts, Justice Mosqueda. Still in recovery from a brutal Oregon defeat in the national championship game. How you holding up, Justice?
Yeah, man. Ohio State just ran another counter on Oregon and got another first down. It's terrible. And then they comboed it with another wham play, and then Cardell Jones trucked the nose tackle again. This thing's gonna be brutal.
Oh, Justice, and on top of that, you're losing your quarterback. My question is, what does Oregon have to offer Braxton Miller, since Florida State apparently has Mia Khalifa offering whatever he wants?
Well, you know what? Florida State used to be known as Free Shoes U, but I think Oregon's taken that title, right? We got a couple pairs of shoes for him if he wants them.
And Justin will be on shortly, but we're getting started tonight with our special guest, first of the year, to kind of open up the draft season. Matt Miller of Bleacher Report. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. I'm happy to finally be on. I've been complaining on the sidelines to the guys to have me on, so I'm very happy that I'm your first guest of the draft season.
Oh well, there's nobody better. Matt, of course, lead writer at BleacherReport.com, does much more than draft over at Bleacher Report. So why don't you tell us what you're working on right now, Matt? I know you got a lot of projects on the fire.
Yeah, I mean, in this business anymore, to get paid, you have to be versatile. So during the season, I cover the NFL nationally, just like any other league-wide reporter would do. And then also, I have a draft focus throughout the year. Like that's probably my biggest responsibility. And then we shift over to the off season, and Justice is helping out with this as well. But a lot of in-depth scouting profile type, series that we're doing. So we've always done the NFL 1000 in the past. This will be our fourth year of doing that. And we're also doing a free agency 100. So scouting, grading, ranking the top 100 free agents who are available this year. And then I'm expanding my draft series, so it'll be 500 scouting reports this year, which is pretty much every player you can think of. So it's great because this time of year, all of that is happening. So all I do all day is watch film and write scouting reports, which is great. It's amazing, but it could be a little monotonous at times. But there should be, if you're looking for scouting reports, we will have one on almost any player you can think of, whether that's NFL or college football, between now and the beginning of the summer.
So only 500 are. So you took it a little easy this year. I
Yeah,
take
a
it
little
with the
easier.
five.
Yeah,
Uh,
now
I'm
that
actually that free agency. That sounds really cool. I'm gonna dig that. I look forward to when that drops.
Yeah, we thought it was like a unique idea. When they approached me about it, I really didn't want to do it because adding 100 more scouting reports is not a fun idea. But job security is important to me, so I said yes. And it's been a lot more fun than I expected it to be because it's so different when you're evaluating an NFL player as opposed to evaluating a prospect. So I kind of threw out my, the format that I use for scouting college players and cooked something new up. So hopefully people like it and read it before they comment and tell me that I'm a moron.
Well, that's gonna happen no matter what you say. So,
Yeah,
um, but I mean, I read your Twitter ads. Those are like walking through hell basically every day.
that's true.
So we're going to dig in here and get started with the NFL draft. Obviously, that's what you're known for. Anybody that is listening to the show, if you don't follow Matt, which would basically be impossible, I'm assuming, um, you can follow him at NFL Draft Scout on Twitter. Just search Matt Miller or NFL Draft Scout. But let's get started. And this quarterback class is kind of the talk of the draft, obviously. Justice has been banging the Marcus Mariota drum for 3 years now, and obviously you're a Winston fan, which I appreciate that because that's a little different than everybody else. But that's a talk that's going to be going on over the next 3 months and not really going to stop. So let's talk about something a little different. Your senior rankings, you have Bryce Petty as your top guy. How did you come to that?
Well, it wasn't easy because the senior quarterback class is not very good. So it's almost a process of elimination for me at this time. There is still, obviously, as you guys know, there's a lot of room between January and the end of May when my rankings end up being final. But from what I've seen right now of the seniors, which that includes Bryce Petty, Garrett Grayson, Shane Carden, Sean Mannion. It's not a very good group. But I think with Petty, you have an interesting mix of athleticism. I don't know if everyone quite yet realizes how athletic he is. 6'3", 230 pounds. He can run, he can jump, he can lift. I think he's going to surprise some people with that. And then, it's tough to, a little bit like Mariota, you kind of have to extrapolate him from his system and I think evaluate his traits and his tools a little bit. So I like his accuracy. I love his intelligence. I think he's a very smart kid. And I'll be honest, in the past, I've had a fault of over-evaluating smart quarterbacks. So this could be my Achilles heel poking up again. But I do think he's smart enough to make the transition to the NFL. He's limited as a downfield passer. We've seen that against Texas, against UCLA. But I do think that he has the traits to be, a solid. I don't know that he's ever going to be a starter, but a solid NFL quarterback who can last in the league for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting, Matt, that you note that downfield thing. For Draft Breakdown, I've actually charted these quarterbacks for a while and stuff now, and in the deep range, he struggled a bit, and it seemed like a lot of people noted a good deep ball from him, but it was almost just that he threw it so often. You know what I mean? It's just that air raid attack, and he just did it so much that you remember the good things that happened, and you forget that he's below 50% in accuracy percentage there. So that's nice that you brought that up. It seems like it's like you and me in that corner by ourselves at this point.
Well, I think you and I chart quarterbacks the same way. And
yeah, I think I got it from you. Yeah.
There you go. That's why. But that's super important to me. And you guys know, I'm sure, I'm not a big stats guy. I think that production can get overstated. But I feel like charting a quarterback becomes a stat, and that's something that I really do put a lot of faith in. And you'll hear me say you have to not only look at what the player does, but what he can do. So with Petty, you're seeing him make those NFL throws because he is going down the field, and he's just not connecting on them. I don't know that it's so much a lack of arm strength, but just a lack of the touch and timing there. So he's an interesting guy to me. As a guy who coached quarterbacks, I'd love to get my hands on him and try to clean up some things. But as far as the senior quarterbacks go, to me, he's the best of the bunch. But that's not saying a whole lot.
So as far as you're talking about guys like Grayson and things like that. I mean, outside of Petty, is there a quarterback you even entertain taking, day 2 in the draft as far as these senior quarterbacks are concerned?
Not right now. And I actually stopped watching Grayson and Carden. I got a few games in, and then their Senior Bowl invitations got announced. And so I stopped because I've always been jealous of the guys who go to the Senior Bowl with like a fresh perspective. They've never seen the guys on film, so they're getting a first look and a first impression. So I'm going to try something different this year. So I've seen about 2 games of each of those guys, and I stopped because I want to go to Mobile and see them in person, watch them throw live, watch their footwork, write up my notes there, and then come back and watch the film. I'm not sure if that's the right process or the wrong process, but it's something I want to try because last year I took one of my assistants with me, and he hadn't seen a lot of the guys before, and he was pointing out things that I didn't catch on film. So I'm going to try to look at a couple of the quarterbacks differently this year and see if it changes anything. But right now, I'm intrigued by Grayson. I'm not sure how much of that's the system as far as his accuracy. So I think Mobile will be eye-opening for me as far as those guys go.
When you look at the quarterback class and you talk about those seniors, you talked about Petty and being maybe the only draftable one early, and by early, of course, we mean day 2. What type of team would he need to be on for you to see him maybe get that success that you're talking about as a kind of career backup?
Well, kind of like Justice was saying, with his struggles down the field, it's easy for me to say, okay, I would love to see him in a West Coast offense where it's a lot of timing, where he could use his athleticism. maybe that's Andy Reid with the Chiefs. I know they don't have a huge need at quarterback, but that's the type of system that I would look to place him in. If Mark Trestman were still with the Bears, I think that would have been a pretty good fit, where he could not be pressed into duty. And again, you're working in a timing-based offense. The Giants have a system a lot like that, so I would kind of steer him to places like that. Green Bay, even though they've kind of broken away from that a little bit and are going down the field more, I think that would be best for what he does well right now. We'll see who he becomes. I think Chip Kelly is the right answer for every quarterback. Like, if you were a perfect world for this quarterback, where would he go? I'm going to say Philadelphia because Chip Kelly has a magic touch right now. But wherever Kyle Shanahan ends up, I think would be interesting too, because I think he does a good job of molding his scheme to fit the strengths of his quarterbacks.
And welcome in Justin Higdon, the other co-host of Draft Savages. Little technical difficulties. Plus, now we don't have to listen to him gloat about Ohio State, so we can just kind of skip over that for now.
What's up, guys? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, bud.
Great.
So when you look at people you've talked to, because you're in the know pretty well. I mean, you get crap about talking to people and things that you hear, but when you talk to people, who are some guys right now that you hear NFL teams are high on that you just don't get? Who are some of those guys right now?
The big one for me earlier this year was T.J. Clemmings, and I didn't get it at all, the Pitt tackle. And it's funny because I think at least, and my wife thinks, I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to changing my rankings. Like, I don't like to be reactive and move a guy just because someone told me a player was good or bad. But Clemmings, I held out on for a long time and kind of kept him in that round 2 range. And it's like, does he move well enough to play tackle? But having gone back the same time I really went back and reevaluated Winston and Mariota and watched him play, Clemmings is the one guy I've probably moved up most over the past few weeks. So he would be a guy that I kind of came around on. But the one guy that I'm probably different on from a lot of people is Melvin Gordon. I still get texts from guys in the league all the time, and I know that there's the thing. I said it, that, I got a text from a scout. But legitimately, because they read our work, all of our work, to see, what the consensus is out there. And Melvin Gordon's the one that I still just don't get. So we'll see, in about a year if I'm way off on this one or not. But I really struggle to see his style translating to the NFL.
You've taken some crap for the Melvin Gordon thing. You have him ranked 4th still, right? I jotted down a bunch of notes on your rankings, and I didn't rank him for some reason. But so that's not really being low on a guy. That's just not as high as everybody else. Is that not kind of?
I think that's the difference. Is that he's 4th. I have him as a mid-round 2 grade. I think it's just somewhat too that he was so productive, and it seemed like if I wrote poorly about him in a week, that Saturday he would rush for like 300 yards. So it was kind of bad timing too. It's like I spoke poorly of him, and then the Nebraska game happened. And
I remember that Saturday, and you took it on the chin a little bit that Saturday because I think you wrote something the Friday before, and you took it a little bit on the chin there. But I mean, you're in a group. I'm pretty sure Justice is with you too. You're in a group that I don't think any of us have him as our top ranked back. So we're just some savages over here. We're definitely kind of in your corner on that, Melvin Gordon.
I appreciate it. When I get all in Alabama, one of you guys can back me up.
Definitely.
Matt, as far as this past draft class was concerned, I mean, who do you think are your big misses at this point? Who do you think you watch on Sundays and you're like, oh goddamn, that one's gonna haunt me for a while. I should have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Justin Gilbert so far, and I hate being reactive about corners because I think it's the second hardest transition from college to the NFL. But I had Justin Gilbert number 7, and there were a couple times this year where it was like, okay, there he is. That's my guy. And then there were other times, a lot of those times where he just didn't seem to get it. And I know there are questions about his work ethic and that, he didn't realize what it was going to take to make that jump to the next level. But he's probably the one that I ranked highest that I would like to maybe revisit. You know, having Manziel in the top 15 looks pretty bad right now too. But it's funny, you know, guys like that, you rank them on upside and athleticism because it's so hard to know about their work ethic, and then they turn around and they don't give a damn, so they don't work hard, and it makes everyone look bad, not just them, but those of us who, you know, like their ability and think they'll project well. So it's such a tough business because you invest your credibility in a kid, and then they don't work hard, and you take as much heat as they do sometimes.
And funny you should mention 2 Cleveland Browns there, Matt.
Yeah, that was not intentional.
I know, and I had them both high too, and you know, unfortunately, things are just not going well.
Yeah, but you know, I think with the draft, it's always fun to look back after the first year. After the second year, you can really start to, I think, study yourself. After 3 years, that's when you can either hop up on the table and, you know, shout that you were right, or, you know, hide away and start deleting tweets about guys because you were so wrong about them. So it's like everyone wants to gloat about Bridgewater right now. I do too, but it's like, man, I've seen rookie quarterbacks look good before and then tail off. You know, Geno Smith looked good to end his rookie year and then really struggled. So it's so tough to say you hit or missed after just 16 games.
Matt, as far as like the philosophy of these positions, I had this presented to me a couple days ago, and you know it's kind of stuck in my mind a little bit. Where someone said, you know, there's positions that are creators and there's positions that are preventers, and the ones that are preventers you want consistency, and the ones that are creators, you know, you can get some more variance. So like, for example, like Kelvin Benjamin, a receiver. I mean, we know, you know, Josh Norris calls him Kelvin Coaster. It's just up and down the entire time. But, you know, some people have really liked what he's done this rookie year, even though it is up and down. But at receiver, you might be able to do that. Whereas corner or, say, you know, tackle, you might not be able to get away with that because your job is to make sure nothing happens as opposed to, you know, being high variance. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's brilliant. I've never heard it said that way, but that sums it up nicely because you're right. Kelvin Benjamin could drop 12 passes, no one remembers because he catches 8 touchdowns or whatever. But if Jake Matthews gives up 12 sacks, everyone in the NFL is talking about him as a bust. So it's when you are that guy, when you're the preventer, you're absolutely right. You know, your back's on an island and you've got to produce. And I think we do forgive, you know, fumbles or drops or interceptions a little bit more than we do. You know, if a corner gets burnt, that's like burned into your memory. Or, you know, if a quarterback throws a stupid interception or, you know, has just a terrible game like Manziel had in his first outing, those are the things we tend to remember. And also they're high-profile positions, so we're going to remember those a little bit better. But you need to put that on a poster because that's definitely very accurate.
Well, we don't want to keep you too long, Matt, but before you're out of here, when you look at your misses over the last 2 or 3 drafts, and you look at some of the things that how do you learn from those? What do you do to go back and see, okay, how did I miss this? Not just, as you said, the work ethic of the kids, but also maybe technically or in tangible sense.
Yeah, well, I think self-study is really important, and it's something I try to stay on top of, and not only to laugh at myself when I miss, but to figure out why I did. And I kind of mentioned earlier, I've learned that with quarterbacks for a long time there, I was overrating the smart guys because that's what I thought you needed. So I put Andy Dalton over Cam Newton. They were close, but I put Dalton at QB1, Newton QB2. And it was because of that, because I felt like his football IQ was going to make him translate to the NFL faster and better. So I think that's probably the big thing I've learned at quarterback is, that sometimes it's not all football IQ and being a nice guy. It's being an athlete and being able to make plays and being able to create. So that's one that's probably always going to stick with me was, putting Andy Dalton that high or, I had Blaine Gabbert, I think top like 18 or 19 that year. I had Kirk Cousins pretty high. So looking back, 2010, 11, 12, that's probably the big thing was the overrating of some smart quarterbacks who, just didn't have all the necessary tools, whether it was arm strength, which is probably the biggest one with a lot of those guys, or the scheme they're coming out of and how much of it translates to the NFL, which, kind of worries me with Mariota, not so much the arm strength, but just the translatable throws. But that goes back to something I try to tell myself all the time, that it's not what a player can't do, but what he can do is super important to the evaluation.
Matt, one more thing on these quarterbacks, since you just brought up Mariota. As far as comparisons go, I mean, what do you think about Tannehill being compared to Mariota and Eli Manning being compared to Jameis Winston?
I heard the Tannehill one the other day. Someone asked me about it, and I think that no comparison is perfect across the board, but I think Marcus is a lot more poised, a lot more confident, especially in the pocket, than Tannehill was at A&M. I also think he's a more explosive athlete, both in terms of arm and what he's able to do with his legs. With Eli, it would be so hard for me to get past that Jameis is a better athlete, I think, in terms of, and this isn't just the stereotypical, African-American quarterback, he's a good athlete, but I think Jameis is able to pick up plus yards a little bit better. People will read into that however they want, but to me, Marcus is, I think, I see the Tannehill thing, but I've always thought that he's a stretched out Russell Wilson, and what Russell Wilson was in college, not who he is now. And that when I watch Jameis, it's like, gosh, you got a mix of so many guys in there. But I love the clutch factor with the Eli Manning, the poise, the fact that he could forget his turnover. So I totally see that one. I would probably lean closer to like a Roethlisberger or a Steve McNair type because of what he can do in the pocket breaks down.
Hey, Matt, one last question before we let you out of here tonight. Of course, the big news today was Cardale Jones announcing that he was coming back to Ohio State. I think a lot of people already had him penciled in. Did he make the right call today, and where did you have him ranked if he did come out?
I think he made the right call, and I know everyone's going to have a divisive opinion about this, but I'm never going to fault a kid for getting his degree. I was a dad young, a lot younger than he is, and didn't get that opportunity, so I totally respect that. I think that you have to take your hat off to a kid like that, so good for him, to put his education first and to understand that these traits that we all talked up over the last few days are still going to be there next year. Those aren't going away. God willing, he doesn't get hurt and something happens. But there's a great chance that those traits will still be there, whether he's the starter this year or not. So as far as ranking, I never really put like a definitive number on him because of the small sample size. But I do think that he could have been in there competing with Brett Hundley for that third quarterback spot, and that probably means a top 50 pick because of the importance of the position and the fact that historically people reach for quarterbacks. I mean, E.J. Manuel went 16 overall when I think most of us had him in the third round. So there's a lot of evidence for the fact that teams will panic at quarterback, and a guy like Jones, I do think he could have paid off from it.
All right, Matt. Well, if you need to go, you can drop out at any time. If you want to hang out, you're always welcome to hang out and keep talking with us as we go along here a little longer. So, but whenever you need to head out, go ahead and jump out.
I've been on the road for 5 days, and I'm about to leave for 2 weeks, so I'm going to hop out and make sure I'm still married with 2 kids. So, guys, I really appreciate you having me on, and we'll have to do this again, and hopefully I'll see a couple of you guys in Alabama.
All right, and I'll try to get in touch with you when you get here in Arizona for the Super Bowl, man.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Matt.
That was Matt Miller of BleacherReport.com. Let's get into this a little bit, guys. First off, with the Petty as the top senior QB, I think, Justice, you are not in agreement with that, and I'm pretty sure Justin is not either. But that's also just because you guys really don't like the senior quarterback class. Justice, what were where do you have kind of Petty in your hierarchy of terrible senior quarterbacks?
Man, he would be close to. I mean, he's in like. I understand him being a top quarterback for someone. Like, he's obviously in that top tier of senior quarterbacks. I just kind of. That's one thing we didn't pick Matt's brain about was the injury. But the injury is going to hurt him a little bit. Like you said, he's limited. 1, 2, 3 is probably going to be, Blake Sims, Brandon Bridge, and, Petty for me. Just because I don't think Grayson has a high upside. But I mean, all of those guys are like 5th round grades for me. So that doesn't really say that much.
Justin, I know you're not a Bridge fan, but who's your top senior guy again?
My top senior right now is Grayson. I know he's 20. He's going to be 24-year-old rookie, so I know that there's a big stigma about that. But considering that none of these guys is probably going to be a starter in this league, I think he's just kind of got he's been the most impressive this year as a senior to me. Been the most productive. I have a production metric. He's the highest scoring senior that played at FBS level. That goes a long way. I think he's got pretty good accuracy. He had a lot of touchdowns. He played in an offense. Jim McElwain was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. They do some interesting pro-style stuff like that. He had a good receiver, good pace to his offense. So, I liked Grayson. I liked Bo Wallace for a long time, and that kind of looks like a joke right now. I still think there's going to be some scouts and some NFL types that kind of like his arm and his height, and just he looks like a quarterback, but just the mistakes piled up at the end of the year, and that just kind of pushes him really into the probably into the undrafted range. And so Petty would probably be my second senior quarterback behind Grayson, but again, those are two guys that are going to be 24 right around the draft. So I don't think there's a starter in this senior class.
You were at the Shrine Game all week, so let's get into that just a little bit. What did you see out there in Tampa other than the bar?
Actually, besides seeing Ohio State win the championship on Monday night, there wasn't very much going on with the quarterbacks down there. The best quarterback down there was Tyler Heineke. He was, he is what we think he is. He's a player with some kind, low upside, but he was the most competent, accurate player down there as far as the quarterbacks. I would say that your guy Taylor Kelly was probably the next best from what I saw. I know some people were telling me that Anthony Boone was looking okay, but as far as the quarterbacks go, there just wasn't much to see down there, and I was keeping my eyes more on the receivers, the defensive backs, and then there were some good battles within the offensive and defensive lines, especially on the West team where they had a couple of draftable. They had more draftable, and even Xavier Williams, the defensive tackle from Northern Iowa, was even a player I think could start getting into that late day 2 round range.
Well, Justin, can you talk about Trey McBride a little bit? He was a guy that everyone seemed to love down there, and Josh Norris was talking about him right before the Shrine Game went down, and I hadn't really, watched him at all, him being at a small school. In practices, what did you see from him?
Trey McBride, to me, he was just kind of average. There were some more impressive. I like a bigger receiver, so there were some more. I really had my eyes on Darren Waller and also Devin Gardner, because those guys really look like those big red zone targets that you like. But McBride made some nice catches on day 2 when I was down there. The first day was kind of tricky for receivers because it had rained in the morning, kind of took some time off, and then rained again in the afternoon. But what struck me about McBride was that he looked really, really small without pads on. When he took his pads off, he didn't look like he looked closer to some of the smaller defensive backs than the other receivers on his team. And maybe that's because the guys on his team were so towering and so big. But yeah, I didn't see what other people saw with him. I didn't spend a lot of time on him. And when I see a player from an FCS rank, we've talked about this on the podcast before, I want to see that guy really come out there and dominate. Now he had his chance against some FBS competition, and I thought that he did okay, but it wasn't anything that really stood out to me one way or the other.
Another guy I wanted to talk to you about was Sean Hinkie, the tackle out of Syracuse. He was a guy who, coming into the season, I actually kind of liked. I had him in like that 3rd round type of range for as far as a zone blocking. Kind of flex tackle, I guess you'd say, because I think he could play guard too. he didn't really have a great year. I mean, obviously, he was a guy that people thought was going to end up at, the Senior Bowl after this year, coming into 2014. But, he didn't have that great senior year, ended up at the Shrine Game, came in and measured a little small. I mean, we're only a year removed from him potentially declaring early in the draft, and his coach saying that he was better than Justin Pugh. What do you see from him down there?
Hickey was one of the better linemen that I saw on the East team down there, but it was pretty clear to me when you got a close look at him, it was pretty clear that he was one of these offensive tackles that's kind of had arms on the short end of things, and so he was struggling some. Those short arm guys struggle in those one-on-one pit drills where they're up against a speed rush, isolated. So I was interested today when I saw that. When Eric Galko, Optimum Scouting, came out with the Shrine Game weigh-ins, and indeed Hickey's arms are under 33 inches. So for a tackle, that's really short. I came home tonight and watched a little bit of him actually on Draft Breakdown, and I just came away he just looks like a guard, and he looks like he could be a pretty good guard, but he doesn't look like a player that's going to be able to stay at tackle. So I think the Pugh comparisons is pretty good, but I don't think he'll get drafted that high because I think teams are looking for more. There's probably a lot of other guys that fall into the same mix with him. But I will say that of the offensive linemen that were down there, he was one of the ones that I think translates best to the NFL.
Would one of the other ones be B.J. Finney of Kansas State? I saw a lot of people say nice things about him.
Yeah, B.J. Finney was really good for the West team. And the thing was, I mentioned Xavier Williams earlier. Xavier Williams was just there's an FCS guy that was just destroying all the FBS guys that he was lining up against at interior line. And B.J. Finney was one of the few guys that could really handle him and not necessarily beat him on every play, but hold his own. And I think that, we were watching Finney go up against him after he had dominated several guys in a row, and they kind of drew some oohs and ahs out of the scouts. So Finney was a guy that definitely caught people's eyes, writers, scouts. Everybody was talking about him, especially on the first day and into the early part of the second day.
That's interesting because he was a guy I actually kind of liked in the preseason. I think like the first week of the season too, Draft Breakdown had a cut-up of him, of Williams, the tackle. I think he has like a wrestling background and all sorts of stuff. Like I remember talking to agents actually, and they're like, "Do you have any guys that like you're seeing that are kind of like under the radar?" And he was one of the guys that I was like, "Yeah, this dude's kind of freaky athletic. Like this guy might have a shot." That's interesting that he did really well. I mean, like I said, I've just only recently been trying to catch up on what's been happening at the Shrine Game because I've been running like a chicken with my head cut off this entire week. So
he's been hiding the entire week. Don't lie.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sleep this hangover off, man. I'm just trying to sleep this hangover off. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, what did you get to watch any running backs while you were down there?
Yeah, John Crockett from North Dakota State. I mean, everybody's talking about this kid this week. He is the loudest guy. Never shuts up. I mean, I sit there and talk a lot while I'm standing on the sidelines, probably annoying people. But John Crockett's that guy on the field, except like 100 times worse. And it's all really positive, really, encouraging. It's like when you're a kid and you're playing sports and your coach is like telling you to talk up your guys. That's John Crockett at this point. He is, and he was especially talking up his another FCS guy from the Dakota, Zach Zenner. And every time Zenner would do something great, he'd say, "Woo, FCS, baby!" And it was like, everyone loved John Crockett down there. And we all agreed that coaches are going to eat that stuff up. Coaches are really going to like it. And then as far as play on the field, he was, he showed some nice speed, turned the corner a little bit. He made some nice adjustments to make some tough catches because he had to those quarterbacks on the West team were kind of shaky, and Crockett was showing that he could catch, he could run. I think I came with I had kind of dismissed him, thinking that he's kind of a dime a dozen running back going down there. And then when I saw him in person, I thought, I got to give this guy a fair shake. I got to go revisit some tape on him.
I have a question about two of the West defensive linemen. Chucky Hunter came into the season on Bruce Feldman's freak list and all sorts of stuff like that. I talked to someone who said that he's probably going to be a top. He and Travis Ricidi, the big 5-tech type from San Jose State, the other defensive tackle I wanted to talk to you about. Both of them are, I guess, going to be like top 10 type defensive tackles in this class, and that Chucky Hunter might be the second best defensive tackle, 3-tech after Michael Bennett. So, I mean, the fact that those type of guys are down there at the Shrine Game kind of, piqued my interest. What do you see from them? I mean, Chucky Hunter kind of seems like that freak type of athlete who's going to be more of a penetrator, while, Travis Ricidi's got probably like 6 inches on him or something like that. He's going to end up being like a base 5-tech at the next level. What do you see in them this week?
Yeah, Ricidi looked good. He was, they would line him up on the edge and let him go kind of do some edge rushing, and he was he was quicker than I thought he would be, and he definitely is strong. He's a really big guy when you see him up close, but he's put together. There's not a lot of flab or anything like that. He looked like he can play. The Shrine or the Senior Bowl only has so many guys they could call up, but Ricidi looked like a guy who would have been able to play with those guys. Hunter is interesting because he's never really caught my eye. I've watched him, and then I kind of drift to other guys like Dawson and maybe some of their defensive backs, because he was kind of uninteresting to me when I watched him in games. And then he's got this really exaggerated frog stance. You guys have seen it. People talk about it a lot. And I wondered aloud, I was talking to some of the guys down there on the sideline, and I said, do you think the coaches tell him to, sit back like that so that he keeps his head up, and instead of charging into the line like 100 miles an hour because of his athleticism, maybe they have him sitting like that to kind of be able to see better, maybe take a more measured approach. So we talked to a couple scouts on Monday, and that was exactly what their thoughts were. They thought that he was being told to do that, coached to do that. So he was still doing that in the practices. They weren't taking that away. And then he was able to handle the interior lineman to a fair degree. I mean, he wasn't spectacular, but he was doing a decent job. It's surprising to me that he's so highly regarded, though, because he's never popped off the screen to me. He didn't pop on the field. There were other more impressive guys.
See, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where I kind of view Carl Davis in that same way, oddly enough, where I'm just like, everyone says you're a freak athlete, but then I watch you, and I just kind of end up watching the people around you.
Yeah, I mean, Xavier Williams is so eye-catching because he's so strong and quick, and just kind of I think he had more intrigue because most people down there hadn't seen as much of him. And then Ricidi, and then some of the edge guys. In particular, I'm thinking of Kyle Emanuel from North Dakota State, who isn't the most athletic guy. He doesn't look imposing. He was kind of smaller than a lot of the other guys, but what was really impressive about him was how he just used a full repertoire of pass rush moves to get by some of these tackles from the bigger schools. So Hunter just kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and I can't remember off the top of my head, so yell out the name if you guys remember, but they have a kid from Stanford down there too who was
Henry Anderson,
a real stout kind of interior nose tackle type, and he was doing pretty well too. He's just really strong kid. So all these guys, I'm noticing and Hunter's just kind of chilling over there.
Oh, my bad. It wasn't Henry Anderson. It was David Perry. Henry Anderson actually ended up moving up to the Senior Bowl a couple weeks ago.
Right, David Perry. That was the guy.
Any interesting rumors on that were being spread around there at the Shrine game?
Well, there were some people talking about Jameis Winston and what they thought had gone down with him. I don't know that that there is so much concern about his character as far as criminal activity as there is about his character from just him being a flake standpoint. That was one of the things I picked up from a couple of people that I talked to. The big thing was on Tuesday, everybody was on Twitter was talking about Cardale Jones. So I was asking some of the NFL guys and some of the other writers on the sideline. I'm seeing on Twitter people are saying Cardale Jones should declare. What do you think? And the scouts were like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Who's saying that? And some of the other writers, hadn't caught up to the Twitter feed yet and were saying the same thing. It really was funny how that picked up steam over the next couple of days. And people were just like really, really caught off guard that people were talking about that on Tuesday morning. Beyond that, there were some rumors about Braxton Miller transferring. Those are the same kind of things we've been talking about almost all season long at this point.
He's going to Florida State.
What's that?
Said he's going to Florida State. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, Florida State or
no, he's not going to Oregon. He's not going to turn down a porn star.
But yeah,
I'd like to apologize to everyone for helping my part and talking about Cardale on Twitter. Yeah, man, whew, I just can't let y'all have like 3 years of happiness. That's just not allowed. Y'all can't have. This is a transition year for Ohio State, and you guys have 3 quarterbacks, and there's like 10 quarterbacks in college football. No, we're not letting Urban have all that.
It was funny because Seth tweeted it the other day that I couldn't even enjoy it, but it was funny because I enjoyed, obviously I enjoyed the win on Monday, and then I was enjoying every bit of this Cardale watch. It was just hilarious to me because on Monday, he had said he wasn't ready to go in, and it became this big media creation. I think the next day, I don't know who was the first one that had to, Cardale Jones should declare my column, but then it took off from there, and he didn't really say anything that made it sound like he was going to leave. And then they had the press conference today. He says he's going back, and then people were mad about that. So I think at some point people, really selfishly wanted him to declare just because something like that never happened, and everyone wanted to see how it would play out. And I'm glad, as an Ohio State grad, I'm glad that he went back. But as a writer, I was like, oh, if he comes out, that's going to be my first report that I write.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing was the first, he should declare piece that got put out was by Time Magazine, and it was actually about Ezekiel Elliott. They're just like, I think the title of it was let college football playoff star Ezekiel Elliott go pro or something like that. And then Maurice Clarett talked about it and was like, no, he shouldn't do that. Don't fight the power. It'll come bite you in the butt. All sorts of stuff. So, I mean, Time just kind of missed the boat on this one. They're not talking about Cardale. They're talking about Ezekiel.
Yeah, it was Ian Kenyon, I know on Twitter, said Ezekiel Elliott should consider sitting out a year and going into the draft. And I kind of said, when has that ever worked? And I named about half a dozen guys that didn't work and said the only guy I can think of is Robert Quinn that did work. And he said those guys were all suspended. And I said, sitting out is sitting out. Whether it's imposed or whether you just volunteer, you're still not playing football. And, I just think you can think of all these catastrophic injuries that happen, and they're still very few and far between. And I still think guys that play obviously have more success than guys who sit out.
Right. I mean, goddamn. I mean, we talked about this with Gurley, right? Where we were like, oh, well, Gurley at least saves his body, and then he gets injured. I'm not sure how much I'm not sure how much an ACL injury, at least the first one, is like your body wearing down as much as it is just like a freak thing that happens. So if it's a roll of the dice anytime, I'm not sure just like saving yourself. Other than I don't know. I just don't think it hurts your chances more in the future. As much as it's just like a random, dice roll. I guess I think like Antonio Cromartie, right? Didn't he like he was like a kick returner for 2 years and was like a slot corner, and then he missed his junior year because of injury, and then declared, and then he turned out all right. But I mean, yeah, you can't think of many people who didn't go for a year, and then who's that North Carolina tackle? He's not doing that much, right?
Oh, Marvin Austin?
Yeah.
Yeah, Marvin Austin, Greg Little, Rob Quinn all missed the same year, and Quinn's the only.
Quinn was a freak too. Like Quinn was like insane. He was clearly like a top 5 guy if he would have played.
Right.
Let's get this wrapped up here with the hot takes, and I know you guys both have a lot because you guys have been texting me all these things, and I'll get started though, because I dropped one a couple weeks ago during the Florida State Oregon game from one of the good guys on Twitter, knowledgeable draft guy, works for NFL.com. Lance Zierlein dropped somebody asked him if he would take Winston at 16, and he said no. I think he's unbelievably overrated. Unathletic, average arm, poor decision maker, and questionable character. No thanks. So this week, he tweets, based on tape and subsequent conversations with 2 respected draft evaluators, I expect the battle between Mariota and Winston to be very close. So in 2 weeks, what the hell happened? How do we go from overrated and wouldn't touch him to now he's in the same breath as Mariota? Is that just?
I think it's I think a lot of people changed their tone about the Winston thing, because of the character concerns thing, but it sounds like the way that Winston got out, because it sounds, at least from what I've been told, Jameis was 1,000% sold on coming back to FSU at one point, and was just he was gonna ride out. And then an agent kind of got in his ear and told him, you don't need to worry about this off-field stuff. You're going to end up going top 5. And that's how he ended up declaring. So I think, that word kind of spread around. I mean, you see people, I wouldn't say Matt, right? Because, like, Matt definitely didn't do this just because someone told him that, Jameis is going top 5. But, you've seen people put Jameis as number 1 in their, mocks and big boards and all things like that this past week. And I think a lot of it's to save face from what they've said and just be like, oh, we got to be on like the right side of like history, I guess.
All right, Justice, you can go next.
Yeah. So Daniel Jeremiah today was talking about Shaq Thompson because he dropped his first mock draft, and Shaq Thompson wasn't in the first round. And he said, I don't see him as a first rounder. He should play. People have said that he needs to play running back in the league. I have him as my 44th player. On the flip side, Dave T. Thomas, who also has worked in the league and writes for Scout.com, compared him to Derek Brooks if he plays linebacker and Darren Woodson if he plays safety. So we have a little bit of a split on this Shaq Thompson thing. And yeah, he said that he's a stone cold top 10 lock. So we have someone who thinks, he's a second-round running back, and someone who thinks he's, a Hall of Fame player at 2 different positions on defense.
So that's pretty much that's the same thing. Justin, you've got plenty. Pick one to start with.
All right, we've already talked about Cardale, so I'm going to save that one for a minute. If we have time, I'll get back to that. But sticking with Daniel Jeremiah, let's stick with that. He came out with the mock draft today, as did Mel Kiper. And both of those guys today had Ohio State receiver Devin Smith in the first round. And I think it was Dan Jeremiah had him 19th overall to the Browns. I as somebody who's seen a lot of Devin Smith down through the years, I just would have never guessed that he was a first-round pick. I mean, Jeremiah, after the Big Ten championship game, he was the first one I heard say that he was the first one I heard call Devin Smith a second-round pick. Before that, I think he had been thought of, before that game, I think he had been thought of widely as like a fourth or fifth-round pick. That game maybe elevates him into the late part of day two, in my eyes. But he's really a strict deep threat. Doesn't have a ton of route running experience, and he's shown inconsistent hands. And if you guys remember Monday night, he made only one catch, and it was a 45-yard bomb, and it was a really great throw that Cardale Jones made, and it was pretty tight coverage on Smith, and Smith went up. It was a contested catch, but he really caught the ball with his chest. And he does that quite a lot, you know. Even in that Wisconsin game, I think one of his touchdown catches got into his chest. So he's a player that's been prone to drops. He's not. He's listed in college under 200 pounds, and he is expected to test well. But we haven't seen that type of receiver have a lot of success when they've been drafted high. And the first guy I came to mind was A.J. Jenkins. And, you know, I don't know that Smith is a whole lot different of a prospect than that. He's a really good special teamer, but I was really shocked that those guys had him in the first round, and I just wasn't sure when they first saw him. I'm guessing it was the Wisconsin game.
Is like he's gonna end up being like the Deion Jordan of receivers, huh? Where people are just like, well, he's athletic, and you just kind of knew he was athletic his entire career, and then towards the end, people are just like, yeah, he's kind of a freak, so like he should be a first rounder. And people just kind of like, okay, and nod their heads. Like that's kind of how Deion Jordan was at Oregon, where like everyone knew he was like this ginormous human who was fairly athletic, but you know, pretty light for his height. But you never really saw first-round talent, and then people were just like, yeah, he's fast. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, people talk themselves into weird things. And with Devin, you know, Urban Meyer was talking about him either Sunday or Monday before the game. And Urban said, you know, Devin Smith has really elevated his draft stock lately. He's a really top-notch gunner on the punt team. And I thought, yeah, and he's right, but that's like a third, fourth, fifth round receiver. That's not a back of the first round at all, and I just don't see that happening.
You got another one, Justice?
I mean, if we're gonna stick with it, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to digest this week with all these new mock drafts. You know, Kevin White going 2 picks ahead of Marcus Mariota in Daniel Jeremiah's mock 2.
That was also that was the Justin Higdon version.
Yeah, I talked him into that one.
Yeah, between that and then it looks like, I mean, Fowler in the third round or third overall. You know, 4 picks ahead of Shane Ray. I mean, it seemed like not a week ago I was trying to talk to people saying, you know, Shane Ray isn't going to be the number 1 pick. You know, that's crazy. We shouldn't think about things like that. And now there's 2 edge rushers, if you include Randy Gregory ahead of him in this mock. There's just a lot of stuff to dissolve, you know, when we see these type of things. I guess my last one would be Josh Norris sticking to Blake Sims as his third quarterback in this draft class. He's really riding with that one. Good for him. I mean, I like Blake Sims a lot. Those home-away splits are something significant. And then just seeing him that last game against Ohio State, I mean, that's really what kind of scared me a bit from him.
Yeah, Sims at QB3, that's interesting because that means that Hundley's at least 4. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Higdon, what do you got?
Well, we'll stick with Josh Norris. He had, before Cardale decided he was going back, I think it was Tuesday, Josh wrote on Roto-World Draft that he has Cardale ranked ahead of Hundley and Bryce Petty. Also on that topic, Sigmund Bloom tweeted to me that if Cardale impresses in the interview and chalkboard sessions, first quarterback off the board is not out of the question. I was really taken aback by those two because, obviously this is a team that you would think I would be making these homer picks about. And again, here's a quarterback that started out as third string. He was known as being a kind of a lazy guy until he had to be pressed into action to take over for Barrett. And then he really played well down the stretch in those 3 games. But there's a lot of Ezekiel Elliott in those games. There's a lot of Ohio State defense in those games. There's other reasons besides Cardale, and you can tell they really simplified the offense to give him the best chance of success. So what this all brings, the question up is how many games do we need to evaluate a player? And it's almost as though a player would be better off to have only played a few games than to have a catalog of 40 games or even 25, 30 games for us to watch. Because if we could just pick, the 3 best games that everyone played, then we would have, I think, all of the draft boards, all of the rankings would look a lot different. It was really surprising for me to read a lot of smart people with good takes say that a kid should go out on 3 games of tape and that was going to be sufficient to take that gamble. I don't think the NFL would agree with that.
See, that's one thing that I brought up with Seth even last year. I think the example I brought up was Brock Osweiler, where some of these quarterbacks, they declare early and it's kind of on the fly, and then you send teams scrambling to get this tape, right? And they don't have an entire season to, watch a guy. They don't have the spring game that they're, digging real deep into these guys. I mean, they really only do that for seniors and, guys that they think are going to leave college early. So, like, when Brock Osweiler came out, and people were like, this guy might be a second-round pick just because he's tall, he's got a cannon, and he's fast. And they, teams don't have much time to decide, and it's like, oh, okay, here's this unknown commodity. At one point, are we going to take you kind of roll the dice on a question mark, and in some ways that might give you better chances than rolling dice on something that's a known commodity. It's really interesting. I mean, we had guys like Eric Stoner from the Mecca account and Alec on Twitter that were saying, Cardale is a better natural thrower than like Cam Newton, and Newton was basically drafted off of athleticism and potential anyway. So if Newton can go number 1, why couldn't Cardale? And just things like that. Like, I don't know. I didn't know which way I really, honestly wanted, if I were Cardale, which way I would have gone. But as an outsider watching this, I wanted Cardale to declare just to watch the world burn. And just
I think there's even a part of me wanted to see that. But deep down, I also wanted him to be able to make the best decision for him. And considering that J.T. Barrett is just got off his scooter and that Braxton Miller's shoulder probably won't be ready until August, I think there's a really good chance Cardale Jones is starting for Ohio State day 1 next year.
Well, and one of the things that we have to remember, and we can end on this subject, is recency bias. Because you remember, Taj Boyd was a first-round pick out of that LSU
Yes.
game. So we're talking about 3 games that were big games that weighed heavily on the public's opinion of a player. And what that does is that allows you to create a false narrative of what you want to believe a player is. Because like you said, we can pull any 3-game stretch from a lot of guys and get, great numbers or great performances. I think it was just the fact that it was the only 3 games he played, and they just happened to be the biggest 3 games of not just his career, but probably the 3 biggest games in college football. When you look at it as Ohio State had to beat Wisconsin convincingly, then obviously the semifinal and the championship. So he showed up in the biggest ways in the biggest games. That creates a nice narrative that, oh, this kid is ready to go, so just go. Whereas, who knows what happens when you get an actual, season of tape on him and you see the ebbs and flows. Because outside of Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and the all-time greats, who doesn't have, lulls in their game? and even those guys have bad games.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think part of the issue too is that prior to the college playoff, I think, and even maybe prior to the Big Ten championship game, I think a lot of people had reserved themselves to Ohio State had lost to Virginia Tech. They didn't belong in the college football playoffs. So I think the fact that they were able to reel off 3 huge wins in a row with a third-string quarterback really kind of spurred people on to say, like, look how amazing this player is. And I think there's just a lot more to those wins than just the success of the quarterback. And I think he was really set up for success in a lot of ways. And I was afraid that if he did come out, he would have been picked apart over the next 3 months. And all of that recency bias that you just talked about wears off.
Anything else before we head out of here, gentlemen?
Hey, man, go Buckeyes. OH.
I
Oh, you guys are crazy. Go Packers, go Colts. Nobody wants to see a Seahawks-Patriots Super Bowl.
Well, Green Bay's losing this week, too, so.
Oh, you are so
Man,
negative.
you don't understand. So Oregon lost. Like, my ex hit me up, like, that night as I'm in, like, my drunken stupor, just, like, nailing around the house, trying to, like, stay awake because everyone else in my house went out to the bar at halftime, and I was like, no, I'm not going to be around people right now. She hit me up and was like, well, at least we still have the Packers to root for. And I'm like, man, I haven't talked to you since June. This is terrible. I'm not going to do anything here. Then my computer crashed the next morning. Had to buy a new computer. I've just been doing data entry for all this Math Rusher stuff, like the past couple of days. And it's just, everything's just setting up for Green Bay losing, and we're just done. We're just done with this month. It's over. We never talk about it again.
Well, it'll get better. I mean, truthfully, I'm glad Ohio State won because the Browns are never going to win anything for Justin. So at least you have the NFL. He doesn't even have that to enjoy. So it could be worse. You could be a Chiefs fan, right, Ames?
I
There.
think this is probably a good time to mention before we get out of here that the Draft Savages podcast is now available on iTunes. Go look it up on iTunes, subscribe. It's I guess we're going to be on Stitcher pretty soon if we're not already. So and Android users can find the RSS feed on footballsavages.com.
And Ames gave us the thumbs up on Stitcher. So yeah, we're on Stitcher, on iTunes, and RSS feed for Android users. So you can find us in any way, shape, or form. And on Monday, we'll be back to our normal schedule on Monday, and we'll be joined by the illustrious and elusive Jinx Alessio. So Honks will be here. He'll butcher names, and it'll be a good time. So it's gonna be nothing but hot sex going forward here on the Draft Savages podcast. So, and I'm trying to get Sully, but Sully he's being a baby. So
Sully's watched 2 players this year, and one of them Cedric Abuhi, and all he talks about is his pillow hands.
Well, and that's what I said just come on and talk crap about the players. We don't even care. We don't need insight. Just rag on them, and I don't know enough. I can't do it. So, Sully, I'm making fun of you, so I hope you listen to this.
Watch the tape, Sully.
That's right. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Ames, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We'll see you guys on Monday. Have a good one, everybody.
Peace.